Hi everyone, History of Education Part 2. Like all good sequels, this will not be as good as the first one. What we're going to look at is exploring the history of education from 1944 to the present day. Understand and analyse the criticisms of the tripartite system, which we discussed last week in the lesson. Build an understanding of the types of education systems that happened after 1944, and examine the success and failures of all of the types of systems. Some keywords and terms which you are going to do at the beginning of every lesson in preparation for every lesson. You need to understand what these keywords and terms are. If you do not understand them after watching the video, you need to research these descriptions. You will be required to know them in every lesson. So there are the keywords this week. So criticisms of the tripartite education system, which we looked at last week. Well, one criticism is the actual 11 plus exam, which is the basis for which you are decided into which part of the education system you go into. It seems rather unfair, and it's been suggested that it was very unfair that based on this exam that you did at an 11-year-old, your future is mapped out for you. And it is certainly not doing what it was put in place to do, and that is create equality in education. There's no parity of esteem. So if you were not lucky enough to go to a grammar school where you got better life chances, then your levels of esteem, self-esteem, and ability to gain opportunities through education were a lot lower if you went to technical or modern secondary school. Argued, particularly from Marxists, that this social inequality and the divide in social class was reinforced because of the system. If we think about reasons why people may not go to grammar school, one of the things we looked at last week was social class. They may not have been able to afford to go to grammar school, and it's at the bottom here as well in terms of geographical differences. If it was a long way away and you didn't have much money or from a working or lower class background, then there was a problem there. And also this idea of self-fulfilling prophecy, where you kind of live up to the label that is put on you. Grammar schools are very middle class institutions, and if you're a working class person and you enter into a middle class institution, then you may be labelled as being thick or whatever, and possibly treat differently to working class children. This could almost guarantee you to fail in education if you weren't being focused upon, and if you were labelled as being thick or an overachiever at 11-year-old, and you're never going to amount to anything, then you might live up to this prophecy, hence the self-fulfilling prophecy. So things needed to change, and in 1965 the comprehensive school system was put into place. This was meant to even out opportunity. So where before in the tripartite system, if you went to grammar school, you had the opportunity of doing higher level subjects, sciences, and things that would lead on to higher level jobs. Comprehensive school system basically meant that no matter which school you went to, you were taught the same curriculum in the same way, in theory, and tested in the same way, and as a result had the same opportunity to go to do higher education, further education, etc. It was also meant to get rid of the social class divide, because everyone, regardless of where you came from, was able to go to those comprehensive schools. However, there's some problems with this. Some argue that it still highlighted inadequacies and the best students were being targeted. Best students going to the best schools, and also within subjects as well, within schools, the best students were being helped so that they could achieve more, and the lower end students were just being forgotten about. There was still great inequality in some universities, so Oxford and Cambridge would want people who've gone to fee-paying secondary schools as opposed to these comprehensive schools. The idea that high flyers were held back, so the opposite of what I've just been speaking about a moment ago, is that attention could be focused upon the weaker students, and high flyers, the intelligent students weren't necessarily learning, weren't progressing, so there was that fear as well. There were great disciplinary problems because of these mix of cultures and social classes, etc. There's a lot of disciplinary problems and a lot of conflict within schools, and that became a real issue, particularly in the 1970s and early 1980s. It says steaming on there. I do apologise about that. That should say streaming or creation of sets. We spoke about the SATs that you did, the SATs, and that kind of put you into, upper, middle or lower groups, alpha, beta, gamma when I was at school. So you were still kind of being streamed, and you were still being labelled as thick or intelligent based on how you did in your SATs. And as I said, working class students were still being labelled, mainly because education, regardless of what level of education, it's normally a middle class institution. Okay, so in the late 1980s, the Conservative Party, who were in power at the time under Margaret Thatcher, came up with this idea about marketisation. And basically what it meant was schools could market themselves and sell themselves as being really attractive to students and to parents. This came about as a result of increased competition within league tables, so schools wanted to be the best in the area, schools fearing being the worst in the area. It led to a lot of choice. Parents could choose where to send their children. It led to schools trying to attract people, branding themselves. Businesses started getting involved in sponsoring schools as well. And so we've got this whole idea about the school supermarket where you can literally walk into several places who all offer the same thing, and you get the best deal for your children or for yourself, whichever way you look at it. Okay, so there's this idea of about this A to C economy with the league tables then. So schools are very much under pressure due to league tables to perform really well. So as a result of it, the kind of focus on students who are capable of getting 5 grade A to Cs, this is what, or A star to Cs, as it is now, because this is what they judged on. So any league tables you see will be like 98% of all students passed their GCSEs, 45% got A star to Cs. Gilbourne and Udall, who are theorists who we're going to come across quite a bit in education, they say that schools do greatly focus upon these students who can help them get up that league table. And it kind of puts schools into a tricky position because they have to take everyone. Everyone has to go to a school, but they need to be able to get these A to C grades for the league tables. So it's kind of put them in between a rock and a hard place and in a really difficult position. So Gilbourne and Udall call this process of educational triage, where they decide what it is they can do for all of these students. So we have these pupils here who are ready to come into the school, and we've got this idea of triage. It's like a waiting area. If you imagine the A&E, where you go if you've ever been in, you're being assessed, and they assess you. So they'll look at students who are, guaranteed pass to the higher end, and then they'll identify and place students who are CD. So with a bit of work we can get them into our league table figures. And then we've got the students who are going to fail. Now you could call this area the SATs, where they go into the higher set, the middle set and the lower set. And Gilbourne and Udall think that this is a form of labelling where these people who are destined to fail because of the SAT results, for instance, are ignored, and this produces a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you're going to think, well, I'm a failure, I might as well act like a failure, and that can be very detrimental to the opportunities for the students moving forward. Will Bartlett in 1993 said there's great pressures on schools from marketisation, and came up with a couple of ideas. First of all, cream skimming, which is where schools go out and select the highest ability students who get the best results, and the costs are less to teach as well. And silt shifting. So if we imagine the cream's at the top, silt, if you do geography, is normally at the bottom of the riverbed, and it's offloading those students who are at the bottom. They're the ones who are expensive, they get poor results, they may be a great expense in terms of special educational needs, or they need readers, or they need learning support in class. Trying to get rid of that, offloading those students, or not allowing them to come in for whatever reason. So if we imagine this idea where it's kind of going round in a circle, we have schools have pressure to select more able students to boost their league rankings, And that in turn leads to an increase in popularity, because if they're selecting the most able students, they are going to get the better results. And as a result of that, you're going to have more people through marketisation want to go to that institution. So their funding's going to increase, and the school, won't be undersubscribed. So we've got maximum number of students for maximum number of teachers. The problem with that is this part down here, where the weaker students have to go somewhere. So the remaining students with the lower grades tend to go to the weaker schools, and because they get weaker grades, they get lower funding as a result. So these schools can't improve, they can't have the best facilities, they can't get the best teachers in. So it's a vicious cycle. If you think about the Marxist cycle, it's one that just goes round and round. It's a really vicious cycle that it's hard to break out of. There's a cost to schools as well. So Ball in 1994 says that schools have to spend a lot more marketing themselves to parents, and this often comes at the expense of areas such as special education leads, learning support and things like that. So the students who are in that school who really need that support to help them boost from a fail to maybe a D, going up a few grades is really, really good. But because they still don't fall within that A star to C category, they'll make that decision, and it's very expensive having learning support officers. It's a little bit cheaper having a cheese and wine evening for parents to come in and you can wow them. And Ball understands that this cost is a detriment to the whole school. There's a suggestion then that we have a new three-part system, so like the tripartite system that was introduced in 1944 onwards. Sheila McRae says that there's very much the same kind of pattern happening in post-16 education, where the top sixth forms are selecting the best students, and these tend to be from middle class areas who have higher academic ability to go on to the higher academic universities, because it looks attractive to them when they're advertising themselves. The middle, these are general further education colleges that look at vocational courses, maybe level 2. These generally are working class students who aren't necessarily going to go on to university, but are going to move towards working class jobs. And then you've got the bottom end, which is more government funded schemes that provide very low level courses, level 1, level 2 courses, very basic courses, which aren't going to go on to help you gain a job in anything higher than lower paid jobs. So Sheila McRae says that we have this hierarchy and this tripartite system within post-16 education, and that is a real danger because it's not allowing everyone to go on to university. So why marketisation? Why is it so important? Well, the New Right believes that state control leads to low standards, so allow the schools to market themselves. If it's run like a business, then it's going to be effective like a business, and to survive you need to do really well. There's inefficiencies if the state control the schools, and there's a lack of choice for parents. Why shouldn't you send your child to a different school because it's a better school? Market forces make schools go out to try and attract customers, because if they don't, they'll go out of business. Other factors that are brought in then, we've got parentocracy, so where parents have choice, they've got the power in their hands, so they will say, well, what can you offer my student, my son, my daughter, sorry, what can you do? And this creates more options, and it raises competition and makes people actually fight through scholarships and things like that for these students. The system looks fair, but theoretically, do you think all parents have the same freedom of choice? No, it comes down to social inequality, social ability, social mobility as well. And it just shows that there's a myth about this education, even the comprehensive education, being fair and equal. Marxists say that this has a major impact and it reproduces inequality, so the whole working system. Go to a working class school or a lower vocational college, then you're going to fall within the working class system, and it's hard to break that cycle, it's hard to become a doctor or whatever. Ball says that these policies legitimise inequality and that middle class pupils get the best education, possibly through the parents, through funding, but also through the fact that middle class schools are generally middle class institutions. For the lesson, what I want you to do is have your file with the notes from this video, You need to bring your interview on education I ask you to do with your parents, your grandparents, your aunties, your uncles, or whoever it is. What I also would like you to do is access Google Drive. Everyone has a Google account through Gmail that you were given for through school. Access Google Drive through that. Have a look at it. Make yourself aware of what's actually going on, where you're going to be using that quite a lot now in class and outside of class. See you all in class. Bye bye, Megan.